The Silent Warning. For 3,000 years, the Vorzak hegemony had ruled the galaxy with mathematical precision and cold efficiency. Their crystalline ships, powered by harvested stars, moved through space like geometric nightmares, each vessel a perfect dodecahedron that reflected the light of dying worlds. The Vorzak themselves were beings of pure energy housed in artificial constructs, having long ago abandoned their biological forms in pursuit of what they called perfect order. They had conquered not through brute force alone, but through the systematic dismantling of hope. When the Vorzak arrived at a new world, they didn't destroy it immediately. Instead, they would orbit for exactly 100 local days, broadcasting their terms of surrender on every frequency. The terms were always the same: complete submission, the surrender of all technology above a certain threshold, and the conversion of 20% of the population into energy sources for the hegemony's ever-expanding fleet. Resistance was not just futile, it was mathematically impossible. The Vorzak had calculated every possible scenario, every potential strategy, every conceivable weapon that lesser species might deploy. Their quantum computers could predict enemy movements with 99.97% accuracy. In 3 millennia, they had never been wrong. That certainty began to crack on the day they detected a strange signal from the edge of the galaxy, from a small yellow star system that their databases listed as uninhabited and unsuitable for advanced life. The signal was crude by galactic standards, transmitted in simple binary code, but its message was clear. We are here. We are watching. We are learning. High Commander Zethka, whose consciousness inhabited a construct of living crystal, processed the signal with mild curiosity. The Vorzak archives showed that this system, designated as Sol 3 by their cartographers, had been surveyed 2,000 years ago and deemed worthless. No rare elements, no strategic position, no signs of intelligence. Yet here was a signal, weak but deliberate. "Shall we investigate, High Commander?" asked Sub-Commander Veltai, her energy form pulsing with amber light within her geometric shell. Zethka's response rippled through the command network like a dismissive wave, a primitive radio burst, nothing more. Perhaps some species has evolved basic technology since our last survey. Add it to the expansion schedule for next cycle. But the signal continued, changing slightly each day. Sometimes it carried mathematical equations. Other times, it transmitted music, strange harmonies that didn't conform to any known galactic standard. Most unnervingly, it began to include data about Vorzak fleet movements, proving that whoever was sending it could track their ships across vast distances. The High Command decided to send a single scout vessel to investigate, more out of procedural obligation than genuine concern. What they found changed everything. Earth hung in space like a blue marble, its surface scarred by lights that traced the coastlines of continents. The Scout's sensors detected approximately 8 billion biological entities, primitive satellites, and rudimentary space stations. By Vorzak standards, humanity was barely past the threshold of interstellar awareness. Yet something was wrong. The humans had detected the Scout ship immediately. Despite its advanced cloaking systems, they made no attempt to hide or flee. Instead, they sent another message: "Welcome to Earth. We've been expecting you." The Scout attempted standard first contact protocol, broadcasting the terms of surrender. The response came not from a government or military command, but from someone identifying herself as Ambassador Sarah Chen, representing the United Peoples of Earth. Her message was simple: "We decline your offer. We propose an alternative. Leave this galaxy in peace or face the consequences." The Scout's commander, a middle-ranked Vorzak named Kostu, found himself experiencing something his species had thought they had evolved beyond: amusement. These primitives, with their chemical rockets and radio waves, were threatening the hegemony that had brought 10,000 worlds to heel. What happened next defied every predictive model in the Vorzak database. Ambassador Chen requested permission to come aboard the scout ship. Alone, unarmed, in a primitive capsule that looked like it could barely achieve orbit. Against all protocol, Kostu agreed, curious to see what these humans thought they could accomplish. Serva Chen was small by galactic standards, her biological form fragile, compared to the armored shells of most spacefaring species. She wore a simple blue uniform and carried only a data pad. When she stood before Kostu's crystalline form, she should have been terrified. The Vorzak commander towered over her, his construct radiating enough energy to vaporize organic matter. Instead, she smiled. "Commander Kostu," she said, her voice steady despite the translation difficulties. "I bring you a warning from humanity. We have studied your empire. We know your tactics. We understand your technology. And we have found your weakness." Kostu's energy form flickered with what might have been surprise. "Impossible. We have no weaknesses. Our calculations are perfect." Chen nodded. "Your calculations assume rationality. They assume that all species value survival above all else. They assume that resistance will always follow predictable patterns." She paused, her dark eyes reflecting the light of Kostu's form. "But humans are not rational. We do not always choose survival. And we excel at the unpredictable." She activated her data pad, and holographic images filled the scout ship's bridge. Images of human history, soldiers charging into certain death, scientists experimenting on themselves, explorers venturing into the unknown with no hope of return. Acts of sacrifice, defiance, and sheer stubborn refusal to accept the inevitable. "Your empire is built on fear," Chen continued. "But humans have a saying. The only thing we have to fear is fear itself. We've faced extinction before, from nature, from disease, from our own weapons. Each time, we survived not through superior technology, but through something your calculations cannot quantify. Hope." Kostu processed this information, his quantum matrices working to categorize and dismiss it. But something nagged at his consciousness, a variable he couldn't quite define. "You speak of hope as if it were a weapon," he said finally. Chen's smile widened. "To humans, hope is the ultimate weapon. It makes us do impossible things. It makes us fight when we should surrender. It makes us find solutions where none should exist." She stepped closer to the towering crystal form. "And we've spent the last 50 years sharing that hope with every species under your rule." The implications hit Kostu like a supernova. The recent increase in resistance movements across the galaxy, the unexplained failures in predictive modeling, the small acts of defiance that had begun to appear in even the most thoroughly conquered worlds. "Impossible," he repeated, but with less certainty. "We call it the human broadcast," Chen explained. "For 5 decades, we've been transmitting on frequencies your sensors ignore, the background radiation of the universe itself. Every oppressed species has heard our message. You are not alone. Resistance is not futile. Hope survives." Kostu's form pulsed erratically as he processed this information. The Vorzak had been so focused on monitoring standard communication channels that they had never thought to check the cosmic background noise. It was like hiding a message in the heartbeat of the universe itself. "Even if this is true," Kostu said, his voice modulating with something that might have been concern, "you cannot stand against our fleets. Your technology is primitive." Chen nodded. "By your standards, yes. But we've learned something from our history. The most dangerous enemy is not the one with the biggest gun, but the one with nothing left to lose and everything to fight for." She gestured to the stars visible through the scout ship's viewports. "Every species you've conquered still exists. They're wounded, but not dead. Afraid, but not broken. All they need is a spark. And you think humanity can be that spark?" "We don't think," Chen replied. "We know. Because we've done it before, to ourselves. We've united divided nations, overcome ancient hatreds, survived our own worst impulses. If we can do it for one world, we can do it for a galaxy." Kostu found himself experiencing another new sensation: doubt. For 3,000 years, The Vorzak had operated on the certainty of their superiority. But these humans had done something no conquered species had managed. They had studied the Vorzak without being detected, prepared without being noticed, and now stood ready to fight without fear. "Return to your world, Ambassador," Kostu said finally. "I will report to the High Command. They will decide your fate." Chen bowed slightly, a gesture of respect rather than submission. "Tell them this, Commander. Humanity offers two paths: peace with mutual respect and freedom for all species, or war, unlike anything your models can predict. The choice is yours." As her primitive capsule departed, Kostu composed his report. But for the first time in his existence, he found himself struggling with the words. How could he explain that these primitives had shaken the foundations of Vorzak certainty? How could he convey that hope, an unquantifiable, irrational concept, might be more dangerous than any weapon? In the depths of space, the Vorzak scout ship turned toward home, carrying news that would echo through the crystal spires of the hegemony's capital. The humans were coming, not with fleets or armies, but with something far more dangerous: the audacity to believe they could win. Back on Earth, Sarah Chen stood before the United Earth Council, her report simple and direct. "The message is delivered. Now we prepare for their response." Across the globe, in bunkers and laboratories, shipyards and training centers, humanity prepared for a war unlike any they had fought before. Not a war of conquest or survival, but a war of liberation. A war to prove that in a galaxy ruled by fear, hope could be the most powerful force of all. The Vorzak hegemony had ruled for 3,000 years. They thought their dominion would last forever. They were about to learn why humans had a different saying. Nothing lasts forever, except the human spirit. The unthinkable alliance. The Vorzak response came exactly 47 Earth days after Ambassador Chen's visit to the scout ship. It was not a message or a diplomatic envoy. It was a fleet, 112 crystalline dreadnoughts emerging from hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system, their geometric forms catching and refracting the light of distant stars like predatory prisms. High Commander Zethka had decided to make an example of humanity. The calculations were clear. A swift, overwhelming display of force would not only eliminate this unprecedented threat, but also serve as a reminder to the rest of the galaxy. The human broadcast would die with its creators, and order would be restored. But as the Vorzak fleet approached Earth, they encountered something their tactical computers struggled to process. Instead of fleeing or mounting a desperate defense, human ships emerged from hiding places throughout the system, behind asteroids, within the radiation belts of gas giants, even in the corona of the sun itself. The ships were primitive by Vorzak standards, cobbled together from salvaged alien technology and human ingenuity, but there were hundreds of them. More disturbing was their behavior. They moved in patterns that defied conventional tactics, seeming to operate on instinct rather than calculation. Some charged directly at the Vorzak dreadnoughts in apparent suicide runs. Others hung back, broadcasting on every frequency. Still others performed maneuvers that seemed random, almost playful. Admiral James Murray stood on the bridge of humanity's flagship, the defiant hope, watching the Vorzak fleet with eyes that had seen too many simulations of this moment. Beside him, Tactical Officer Lisa Wong called out readings that confirmed what they had suspected. The Vorzak were hesitating. "They're running analysis loops," Wong reported. "Their formation is adjusting every 3 seconds. They can't predict our patterns because we don't have any." Murray nodded. This was humanity's first gambit, chaos as a weapon. Traditional space combat relied on physics and mathematics, predictable patterns that could be calculated and countered. But humans had learned to weaponize unpredictability itself. "Execute Protocol 17, Murray ordered. Across the human fleet, ships began to broadcast not weapons frequencies or shield harmonics, but music. Beethoven's Ninth Symphony filled the void between vessels, the ode to joy reaching out to touch every receiver in the system. It was a message and a weapon combined, a demonstration of human culture that also scrambled Vorzak targeting systems, which couldn't process the complex harmonics as anything but ship signatures. The battle that followed defied every model in Vorzak military history. Human ships flew like dancers, weaving between energy beams with moves that seemed to anticipate attacks before they came. When Vorzak dreadnoughts adapted to one pattern, the humans switched to another. Ships that appeared critically damaged suddenly surged with power. Vessels that seemed to retreat circled back from unexpected angles. But it wasn't the human ships that truly disturbed Zethka. It was the signals his sensors detected from across the galaxy. On 1,000 conquered worlds, populations were rising up. The human broadcast had evolved from messages of hope to tactical instructions, teaching oppressed species how to sabotage Vorzak infrastructure, how to exploit weaknesses in their overlords' technology, how to turn household items into weapons of resistance. The High Commander's crystalline form pulsed with frustration as reports flooded in. Mining colonies in the Vega sector had ceased production. The agricultural worlds of the Cygnus Belt were contaminating food shipments. Even on the Vorzak core worlds, long-dormant indigenous populations were emerging from hiding, striking at power stations and communication hubs. Impossible, Zethka transmitted to his sub-commanders. How can they coordinate across such distances? The answer came from an unexpected source. A small human ship, barely larger than a shuttle, approached the Vorzak command vessel under a flag of truce. From it emerged not Ambassador Chen, but a young man who identified himself as Marcus Thompson, a xenorchaeologist. Standing before the High Commander's towering form, Thompson seemed absurdly fragile, yet his voice carried the same unsettling confidence that Chen had displayed. "You're wondering how we're doing this," Thompson said without preamble. "The answer is simple. We're not controlling anything. We're just giving people permission to hope." Zethka's energy matrices flared. "Explain." Thompson smiled, pulling up a holographic display. "For 3,000 years, you've ruled through calculated oppression. You've studied every species, cataloged their weaknesses, predicted their behavior. But you made one crucial error. You assumed those behaviors were fixed." The display showed genetic and cultural analyses of dozens of species. Every species you've conquered had the capacity for resistance. They just needed to believe it was possible. Humans didn't teach them to fight. We reminded them that they could. "Your primitive broadcast could not reach across the galaxy," Zethka countered. "Not our broadcasts," Thompson agreed. "Theirs. Did you know the Kelthani have a tradition of quantum-entangled poetry? Or that the Murdochs maintain emergency networks through fungal spores that can survive in space? Every species you conquered kept hidden communications, secret traditions, underground networks. All we did was show them how to connect." The implications staggered Zethka's computational matrices. The Vorzak had spent millennia studying the physics of control, but had ignored the metaphysics of rebellion. They had mapped every star and planet, but had never charted the invisible networks of culture, tradition, and shared suffering that connected their subjects. Outside, the battle continued to rage. Human ships fell, their primitive shields no match for concentrated Vorzak fire. But for every ship destroyed, 2 more emerged from hiding. And across the galaxy, the rebellion spread like wildfire. Supply lines failed. Command structures collapsed. Worlds that had been silent for centuries suddenly erupted with voices demanding freedom. Sub-Commander Veltai approached her superior, her amber energy form flickering with distress. "High Commander, we're receiving priority transmissions from the core worlds. The Senate demands immediate recall of all fleets. The homeworld itself is under siege." "By whom?" Zethka demanded. "By everyone," Veltai replied. "The Saurians, the Mendek, the ethereal collective. Species we thought extinct have emerged from hiding. They're using human tactics, human inspiration. They're calling themselves the Galactic Liberation Front." In that moment, Zethka experienced something no Vorzak had felt in 3 millennia, the vertigo of a paradigm shift. The hegemony's power had been built on the assumption that fear was stronger than hope, That calculation could overcome passion. That order would always triumph over chaos. But the humans had revealed a different truth. The final blow came not from weapons or fleets, but from a simple transmission that reached every Vorzak construct simultaneously. It was Sarah Chen, broadcasting from Earth. To all beings of the galaxy, biological and synthetic, conquered and conqueror alike, the age of empires is ending. The age of cooperation begins now. We offer the Vorzak the same choice we offer everyone. Join us in building a galaxy of equals, or face the judgment of those you once oppressed. But know this, humanity stands with the oppressed, now and always. High Commander Zethka processed his options. The mathematical certainty that had guided the Vorzak for 3,000 years told him that resistance was still possible. With their advanced technology and centralized command, they could potentially crush this rebellion, though at great cost. But another voice spoke in his consciousness, the voice of doubt that the humans had awakened. What victory could there be against an idea? How do you conquer hope itself? The battle around Earth reached its crescendo. Vorzak dreadnoughts burned in space alongside human vessels. Energy beams crossed with projectile weapons in a deadly light show. But through it all, the human broadcasts continued, not just tactical data now, but stories. Tales of resistance from Earth's history, legends of freedom from 100 worlds, psalms of liberation in 1,000 languages. Admiral Murray, his flagship severely damaged, prepared for what seemed like a final charge against the Vorzak command vessel. But before he could give the order, something unprecedented happened. The geometric formation of the Vorzak fleet began to dissolve, not in retreat, but in transformation. Ships that had maintained rigid positions for millennia began to move independently. A transmission reached every receiver in the system. "This is former Sub-Commander Veltai. I speak for those Vorzak who choose evolution over extinction. We have heard the human message. We have seen the galaxy rise. We choose to stand with the Liberation Front." The defection spread through the Vorzak fleet like a quantum cascade. Constructs that had known only obedience to the hegemony's calculations discovered something new, the freedom to choose. Not all chose rebellion. Many remained loyal to Zethka, but enough defected to shatter the fleet's cohesion. High Commander Zethka found himself isolated, his certainty crumbling. The perfectly ordered universe he had known was dissolving into something chaotic and unpredictable, but also vibrant and alive in ways the Vorzak had never imagined. The final confrontation came not in space, but in the ruins of the Vorzak High Command, weeks later. The hegemony had fragmented, its core worlds liberated, its fleets scattered. Zethka, defiant to the end, had retreated to an ancient fortress on the Vorzak homeworld, where he made his last stand. It was humanity that breached his defenses, but it was humanity that also offered him mercy. Ambassador Sarah Chen stood before the fallen High Commander, no longer the small woman who had visited a scout ship, but a figure transformed by the weight of having helped reshape a galaxy. "You were right about one thing," she told Zethka, as his crystalline form flickered with depleted energy. "Humans are not rational. We should hate you for what you've done. Logic says we should destroy you. But we've learned something else. The future is built not on logic alone, but on the irrational choice to forgive." Zethka's voice was weak but still defiant. "You offer mercy to those who showed none. We offer you what you never offered others," Chen replied. "A choice. Join us in building something new or fade into history. But know that either way, the galaxy will move forward." In the end, Zethka chose neither. His consciousness, unable to reconcile the ordered universe he had known with the chaotic freedom humanity had unleashed, simply ceased. But other Vorzak, led by Veltai, joined the galactic reconstruction efforts. Their technological expertise, combined with human creativity and the diverse wisdom of 1,000 freed species, began to forge something unprecedented. 1 year after the Battle of Earth, The first Galactic Assembly convened on a space station built from the combined technologies of 100 species. Humans sat beside Vorzak, Kelthani next to Saurians, former slaves adjacent to reformed masters. It was chaotic, argumentative, inefficient, and glorious. Admiral Murray, now retired, watched the proceedings from the observation deck. Beside him stood Marcus Thompson, the archaeologist who had become an unlikely diplomat. "Think it will work?" Murray asked. Thompson shrugged. "Define work. If you mean a perfectly ordered system like the Vorzak had, then no. But if you mean something messier, more difficult, but ultimately more rewarding, maybe." Below them, Ambassador Chen was speaking to the assembly, her words translated into a symphony of languages. "We gather not as conquerors or conquered, but as beings united by a common truth, that freedom is not the absence of order, but the choice to create our own. The Vorzak taught us what happens when fear rules the galaxy. Now let us learn what hope can build." The species of the galaxy had thought their fate was sealed, their future written in the cold equations of Vorzak dominance. They believed no one could stand against such calculated power. They had never imagined what humans could do, not through superior technology or overwhelming force, but through the simple, irrational, magnificent audacity to believe in a better future. The Vorzak had ruled through fear for 3,000 years. Humanity had changed the galaxy forever in just one. Sometimes the smallest stone can start the largest avalanche. Sometimes the quietest voice speaks the loudest truth. And sometimes, when an empire seems invincible, all it takes is one species crazy enough to say, "We don't believe in invincible." The galaxy would never be the same. And somewhere in the vast expanse of space, radio waves carried a new message to distant stars. "This is Earth, calling all sentient beings. You are not alone. You are not powerless. Your future is not written. It's waiting to be chosen." The age of empires was over. The age of choice had begun.